Oshkosh Advisory Parks Board meeting. Roll call, please.
Davis.
Here.
Millet.
Here.
Plum.
Here.
Metz. Franz.
Here.
Herman.
Here.
Hudak.
All right. Minutes, questions, concerns, changes?
Move to approve. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, into new business. Presentation of the Forest Strategic Plan and Forestry Management Projects.
Yes, perfect. So tonight we have Rich Howard from EOSign. He's going to help, or EOSign is going to help the city of Oshkosh with our strategic. Do you need a mouse? Yep. Our strategic and management plans to kind of help give us a sense of where we're at, what we want, and where we're going to go, how we're going to achieve it.
Thank you. I guess we'll need to go back to the agenda. Well, welcome. How are y'all doing tonight?
Very good.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure to present kind of the kickoff to the Advisory Park Committee, the Forestry Strategic Plan and Forestry Management Plan. I actually kind of like this project because it builds what often is into one plan into several different ones, which often makes sometimes, in my opinion, the operations part a little easier to attain rather than this big binder sitting or this big booklet or electronic document sitting in someone's computer. It makes it more tangible and usable bits. And a brief outline of where I'm going to be going today over about the next 15 minutes, and we built in some time for some group discussion. And feel free to interject as I'm presenting any questions you may have. I'm very used to that. So I'll give an introduction to who we are as a company. I'll talk briefly about the project, a little bit about the community engagement approach we're using, and I'm not sure if in part of your packet if you got a set of questions that are tentative, proposed ones. Okay, I'm not getting into those details, but I've been working with Travis actually on community engagement questions that hopefully we can go live within a few weeks to get a sense of the community, more on that. Interjecting throughout the presentation, we'll talk about some factors affecting trees in the city of Oshkosh, and then we'll have time either during the presentation or at the end for any questions and discussion that you may have. So about EOSign as a company, we're actually a nationwide company. We date back over 90 years. Maybe you've seen a company called Right Tree that got started with utility work, pruning trees around utility, whether distribution or electrical lines out of Des Moines, Iowa. And so we're actually part of that on another side that we do environmental planning, environmental work, inventory assessments, for example, in the community forestry part. Or I'm part of what's the forestry and utility division. So we've been around for a long period of time, and actually I own the company. I'm an employee, and we're an ESOP, familiar with that term, employee stock ownership program. So it's a awesome company with a lot of cool things, such as family is one of our tenants that we operate with. Now I'm officially fancy role director of urban forestry. I'm serving the role of project manager, but I've got on the left there some great people I work with, Sarah Lilly and Liz Lingo. They'll be part of this project team also. They pull into it. For example, Liz, she was city forester for City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And so she brings in great expertise from practitioner, also working in the park. She was basically the park supervisor in that city before she joined us about 2 years ago. Sarah Lilly's been with the company for about a decade or so, working on both natural resources work, forestry related, on utility and municipal world now. Matt Johns is part of the team. He's going to be doing canopy assessment, which is part, and I'll talk briefly about that in an upcoming slide. And then Cassidy, my great esteemed colleague sitting in the chair over there to my left, is a part of the project team, and she's actually a local person from Billion, Wisconsin, so she knows much about the eastern part of Wisconsin. Along with myself, early career jobs, I've told Travis and Ray that I actually used to work in the city of Oshkosh for a landscape company, Vanderhei. So early career days back in the late 80s, early 90s, I had experience of this exotic kid from Minnesota spending some time in the Fox Valley, so it's a pleasure to actually be part of this project from that perspective. Now, key objectives, one of these, and this comes directly from your packet of information, was a management framework. And so certainly governance works its best when you have people that are actively involved, not only developing it, but also reviewing it. So we'll be doing a review of policies that you have, such as ordinances, looking for things that perhaps could suggest changes to maybe better work in the governance, or perhaps what you have currently on the books for ordinances are the best we've ever seen. So that's part of the discovery we'll be going through, along with thinking about some of the practices that are occurring, whether it's in parks or some other department that has some influence on the tree population in the city of Oshkosh, along with community engagement. So really this management framework is an important part of developing ultimately the policies and procedures and practices that people are really tuned to and favor to manage trees in the community. Certainly developing strategies and ultimately long-term, and you could debate what long-term is. Some communities will say we want a 5-year plan, others will say a 10-year plan. And really for this particular project, there wasn't necessarily a time frame component of like 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, but we're developing a strategy from perhaps a short, medium, and long-term perspective. And then resiliency, biodiversity, and sustainability. Really think about the urban forest, and the items that we talk about above there ultimately is to have a long-term sustainable urban forest. And personally myself, when I plant a tree, I think of it as a centurion, that the goal there is to have it around for 100 years. And the last part is really thinking about what, and this is really part of your community vision of objectives like community well-being for people, environmental sustainability. So this is the task schedule and laid out from April through December 31st, 2025, when we'll have the final plan all adopted and approved by the council. Before that occurs, though, there's draft operations going all the way back to, let's say, task 2 that we're currently working on, the state of the urban forest. So you've got tree inventory. We're working on assessment of that to see where you're at for things such as tree diversity, the health of the tree population, things such as that. We'll also be doing a tree canopy assessment. Again, I'll briefly talk about that. So these various tasks lay out the outline of where I'm going to be going over the next 10 minutes. So what do we have? And so the state of the urban forest, what do you have? You could look at it a lot of different ways. A tree inventory is a record of trees you have on the ground. And so this is where someone goes out, and like Cassidy, for example, has been working the past couple weeks through communities in Wisconsin, recently just actually in Connell Falls, inventorying their tree population in parks and along streets. So we already have that work, fortunately, that was done in Oshkosh, and so we'll be taking a look at that, along with the tree canopy assessment. So we're going to be doing a current time period, 2024, that we have recent imagery for the state of Wisconsin through USDA Forest Service. And we'll be looking at points on the ground and determine what % of your total land area is actually covered by trees. I also have actually a canopy assessments built in this project that will go historical, so we'll go back to 2014. So you'll get a timestamp of 2014, 2018, plus the most recent to see how the tree population has changed. I can make a projection. My gut feeling is your tree population canopy has gone down. Why? Emerald ash borer, perhaps, is one of the reasons. But that's one of the neat things about a canopy assessment. It gives you kind of a bird's eye view perspective over time. But the tree inventory itself is boots on the ground. Urban forest governance plans, so we'll be again looking at policies, procedures, and practices. And really an important part of our role here is developing some recommendations for tree preservation on various landscapes, whether it's public or private. And that's something I look really forward to, because it's something I've been involved with for about 30 years of my life. Another part is looking at best management practices. So there's industry standards. Unfortunately, I've been involved with projects in Wisconsin and nationally where we look at what communities are doing. Plus, been very active of our industry standards, the A300 committee, where we look at tree care practices and what's best for tree populations, and really thinking about working with contractors or doing work in-house with staff. These industry standards are really important. So in a sense here is really benchmarking where is Oshkosh relative to your peers and making recommendations. And the last part is thinking about the state of urban forest is really staffing and funding. This is an important part. So getting a sense of where you are currently, your state of urban forest, where work occurs. Certainly parks is a big important role where Travis plays with the tree population, but there's also other departments, public works, for example, planning. All these do have an impact certainly on the urban forest, and really getting a perspective of where you are from a staffing perspective. How do you relate to your peers? What kind of work maybe you might have goals to obtain, and if so, what's the cost of actually doing that? So Oshkosh, what's always neat is I get an opportunity to visit communities, either in person, such as tonight, or through imagery such as we have here, and you kind of get a sense. I look at this image here, and this was some drone imagery that I took a still shot from your website here today. And I look at this and I can depict things like these purple little things. They're probably Schwedler maples or Crimson King. And so you get a perspective of diversity from a picture like here. I also see some challenges to growing trees in the city of Oshkosh. So if you look at this, the left bottom part of the image, I don't know if you can detect a utility line along a street there where you have no trees, but you have not only a narrow planting area, but also a utility line. So you got challenges from perspectives like that. So an image like this, thinking about like a canopy assessment, it'll give us a bird's eye perspective of the opportunities and also kind of the challenges. And I'm not certainly, having spent enough time of my life in Oshkosh, an image like this doesn't surprise me that that you have some challenges if you want to get trees right next to the street. The other thing, the cool opportunity, is you have a really well-stocked tree population in other parts on the property owner's side of the sidewalk. And so that's kind of interesting how Oshkosh has fared from just how you've historically developed the city and your tree population. All right, community engagement. There are a lot of systems out here. Here's one, and I'm not going to go through all the words here, but I'll do a synopsis. Dr. Carmichael, she was doing some work for Detroit, Michigan, where they discovered that people understand trees, they like trees, but the biggest concern for planting trees in Detroit was who's going to take care of them. And Cassidy actually has been working in a community in Michigan where they found the same thing out, that the property owners are not really tree lovers. They love trees, but it's a population of trees that have not been maintained for many decades. So it's the property owner that has to take care of the brush when it hits the ground. And so community engagement really is about establishing trust. And my sense in Oshkosh is you probably have meeting with a few weeks ago with all the different departments, with Travis and Ray, et cetera, that operationally within Oshkosh, I think you have a pretty well tuned, people get along pretty well. My sense of this community is the same thing, that the trust factor is not missing, but really community engagement at the end is if you're missing a trust factor, gaining that part, and there's different ways, but also thinking about at the end, what do people like, their likes and dislikes of trees. And so the community survey that we're going to do is part of this. And part of the questions is really thinking about, do people have access to green space? And if so, if it's lacking, how far do they have to walk to a park? There's some statistics out there that if you have to go more than 5 minutes, the odds of a person visiting a park decreases greatly. If it's 10 minutes, it's almost an unlikely event unless they get an automobile. So access to vegetation and really those footprints of time it takes to walk is important. Getting at people's likes and dislikes. This probably doesn't surprise you. People dislike trees because they drop leaves. Can you believe that? But there's other things that people may or may not like. It doesn't probably surprise you that people like fall colors, okay, before the leaves drop. They like the color of flowers, okay, but there's likes and dislikes that we'll get. And we're able to segregate this into some demographics that we ask. Certainly community meetings is an important part of engagement, such as tonight. Visiting with the advisory park committee to get some sense, first of all, certainly to give you a perspective of where we're going, but also get a sense of any questions that you may have. We're going to be having a couple open house meetings where this is inviting the community to play various community engagement games, such as I like to call pin the canopy on a map. And it's about giving an idea of the likes and dislikes of people, but another form of, rather than just a community survey, is opening up to community members to come in as another approach to give us a perspective of really what their interest is in the urban forest in the city of Oshkosh. And then governance updates, such as we have here going on tonight, but also with Common Council. And then SWOT. I put this in here as a community engagement. We could probably put this in another operational phase of this project, but strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And perhaps some of you have been through such an exercise. And sometimes it can be intimidating when you get different players from different departments together at a common table. And there's some strategies how you do that, where there may be some decisiveness between people, that they have some concerns. But usually when you have these threats, they actually really become opportunities, but more so they become the next thing that you can make into a strength, maybe in a tree population in the case here. But we've got this plan tentatively for about the 3rd week of July, and we'll be solidifying that here in the near future. And then standalone plans. As I mentioned, we've got the strategic and then the urban forest plan, which I really compliment you for doing. We're also going to have a report on the state of the urban forest, so the tree inventory plus the canopy. And then the community engagement part itself will be a standalone plan. So you're going to get 4 plans here that we can, again, put them all into one document. The nice part about this is when we get the state of the urban forest done, you're going to be able to get a chance to see that report sooner rather than later. The same thing with community engagement. So it's not everything at the very end. There'll be piece works along the way. So one of the outcomes of this is really developing goals, objectives, policies, metrics. And there's different terminologies we can use here, but here's just one example of the tree population. And there'll be more than just this in the outcome of the urban forest plan. We can take tree canopy, for example, is actually setting a goal. And that's really a community comes together and says, I think it'd be nice to have 1/3 of the land area covered with trees. So a tree canopy assessment then can be done to say, well, we're at 25%. So that obviously suggests we have an 8% canopy in real numbers, a gap. And so using that as a metric to plan for. And maybe you're actually already over your canopy goal. I've had that in a few communities. Often it's just the opposite of that. So again, these different metrics are a way then you can evaluate, are you attaining the goals that you have ahead of you? And then on the home stretch here, we'll turn over to questions, is again, really emphasizing the forestry strategic plan and the forestry management plan. And really the strategic plan this is a grant funded project through the Wisconsin DNR. And part of their outcome, and my compliments to my colleagues in the DNR years ago, Don Kishner being one of them, where they came up with a set of objectives that you need to have in a plan. So the investment in the state of Wisconsin, for example, is making Oshkosh. They see that the consultants that work with the community actually are at least hitting a minimum set of requirements, and will exceed those. But that's an important part for the strategic plan. It'll also meet the requirements for your grant. And then the other part is the management plan. Really, that's the boots on the ground where you're thinking about budgets, estimates, timelines, and then integrating it. We can call them KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics, or benchmarks, but really having a plan, some ideas, and then things that you can evaluate yourself with over time. I put this image in here from your strategic plan for the community. Is rather than reinventing the wheel, one of the things we proposed in our work that we were awarded was actually integrating as best we can with existing plans. And so, for example, the strategic plan. And if that is still the best outcome of using the terminology and integrating with those plans, it really, at the end of the day, it makes everything work best from, I guess, in my opinion, operationally, where you've got plans that are going in the same direction rather than you've got the urban forest plan that is separate from a street tree, a streets plan that's separate from a parks development plan, a master plan, for example. So integrating these things together as best we can is always a recommendation I have. So, closing questions and discussions.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. Because I own land in northern Wisconsin, and counties, obviously, their county forest land is all about making money.
Yeah.
Obviously, millions. And as a community, we've had years where we've had diseased trees, we had to take them down and stuff. Is there any possibility of a forestry plan at municipal level that could, in the end, you put money in, put the trees in, but 20 years from now, you could actually take them back out and actually make some economic development out of your forestry plan?
Yeah, you could if that's a goal. Definitely, wood products, for example, is being one of them. And City of Milwaukee actually has been doing that. Their goal, you could say, is to monetize the urban forest. It really was about the end life cycle of a tree. The trunk could actually be made into wood products. And David Sivier really pioneered that work for Milwaukee, where they're close enough to a milling operation, kettle moraine forestry. And so it worked out really well. So yes, that actually could be a goal.
So I guess the plan, my thinking is short-term / put the right trees in that 20 years from now becomes an economic development to not only keep our urban forestry going, but we also can regenerate some revenue to either replant or actually make some long-term investment of the city to offset costs and stuff.
That's
And
really,
what just on a short term, what kind of trees would we be looking at or something that would be pleasing for our parks and neighborhoods and stuff that would do something like that? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but.
Yeah, well, here's the challenging part. It's hard to predict what the wood products market will be 20 years from now.
Right.
Yeah, and so I remember buying a house, and they said, the color of the wood is awesome. It was a dark cherry color, and then when we went to sell it, no one likes the cherry color.
Yeah.
And so if that gives you a sense. So
it's a little bit of a crapshoot.
yeah, it is. So really thinking about the urban forest and diversifying, and really probably the biggest challenge you'd have with residents, they're like, okay, this tree is now providing shade. It's just provided its economic return. So thinking strategically of places that it makes sense. Maybe it's an area that you're going to develop in 20 years. So thinking today of maybe there's something you could plan to the future from a wood products operation. So yeah, that's something.
So on that side though, is there a rough, you got to have 30, 40, 50 acres to really make it worth something? Or, because I forget how many acres of parkland we have in the city?
400 plus.
400
Yeah.
plus, so, we got some pretty big parks where, could we financially down the line, because I can't believe it, every municipality isn't looking for revenue. You know, and obviously if we're gonna have a planting tree program, can we plant trees that, like you say, down the line would be economically a benefit?
Yeah, I think at least to hit that goal that you have is thinking about a tree at the end of its life cycle. Is there something that you can do to monetize the value? At a minimum, if you can just totally eliminate the cost of the removal, that's a desirable goal. But if you can go above and beyond that from a net gain, that's even better yet. And that's where Milwaukee's goal was number one is to have another use for their wood products, but also to reduce the cost operationally of the removals, because they could then get some return from Kettle-Moraine, for example.
Okay. So I guess as a Parks member, I guess as we move forward with this plan and citizen engagement and then eventually the council, that I think there should be an economic look at what is a good plan for the city, and then down the line that there might be some economic takeaway from it, you know.
Yeah, actually the heart of that question is also important, because if you look at the urban forest, it actually has a lot of economic engines behind it. One of it is ecosystem. And so as part of this plan, it wasn't formally in the RFP, but the inventory we have, we can easily do what's called an I-tree analysis. And so we'll look at the effects of holding carbon, uptaking carbon, holding stormwater back, energy conservation, things like that. So already right now, most urban forest populations, and my speculation Oshkosh would be no different, is returning $2 to $3 to $4 for every dollar invested. Okay. So you'll get a perspective from that forestry is not just something that it's a black hole you're throwing money into. Right. But the neat thing is trees grow over time, and it takes about 15 years before they take a return on investment from work that was pioneered in Wisconsin. So, yep.
Good. Thank you.
Excellent.
In what's your estimate? I think you mentioned in timeline to get out to the community for like a survey or?
Yeah, we're going to work with the city of Oshkosh with the POCO environment, which is pretty neat because you already have a huge end size of people that are registered. And so it looked like an email from Travis today. It's possible in a couple weeks that we could go live with that. Okay. Yeah, and run for about a 30-day time period. So I'm actually pretty excited that it's actually that soon. Okay. And I think we got a good set of questions already developed. And so, but going soon. You bet.
I think the other part of the community engagement that we talked about too is getting out into the community, some of the special events we have going on, maybe down to the farmer's market, making an appearance and getting some input there. And,
yeah, and that by the end of this week should have the proposal of which events that would make the most sense for us to go to. But the farmer's market itself, the one time I was here, I saw it was just a great festival on a Saturday. That's a really viable operation to attend.
All right.
Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about the tree canopy? I know you're going to obviously part of the study, but what's the average in Wisconsin? And
that's really putting on my spot. I should know this because I did 400. Well, I should say I hired people to look at about 1 million sample points in the ground. My gut feeling in Wisconsin is about 25%. And that, and I'll give me some leverage here, about plus minus 10%, then I think I'm within the bounds. But yeah, somewhere about 25 to 30% on average in communities in Wisconsin. Some have more, some have less.
Who would you put on the top of that list?
That's also putting me on the spot. I'd have to look at my data set.
Okay, I'm sorry, Rich.
No, that's okay, Ray. I can remember insignificant figures, something like this that's really significant. I should know off the top of my hat, but I don't.
Yeah, and we'll see that as part of the benchmarking, I'm sure.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, and you got to put a caveat on this. For example, I was doing some trees and ice storm debris work and then throughout the United States 15 years ago, and there's a community that we found had 85% canopy cover. I mean, this is insane. Well, most of this community was forest. So getting back to the question of like forest operations, that community actually, I would suspect, actually does use their forest as not only an aesthetic thing, but as probably a recreational and an economic potential through wood products. But yeah, but throughout Wisconsin, I don't have that number committed to my head. But that will be part of the work we actually do, is thinking about benchmarking how you sit for other locations. Hopefully there's one more question I have at the top of my head.
Have you done this in any other communities in Wisconsin?
Yes, we have. Yeah, actually we've
Which
done.
ones?
Edgar, Wisconsin's being one of them.
Okay.
Dane, Wisconsin last year. Auburndale, working with Econo Falls, Rosendale. Got a project going with Fitchburg this year. Are some examples.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm excited to see what comes out
Yeah.
of this.
I'm glad I could answer that question.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw you a softball.
Yeah. I'm also getting old in age where, those instant facts aren't always easily recallable. Well, awesome. I'll put your agenda
Thank you.
back up there in 25 minutes. Nailed it. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
All right, well, thank you. And now next, presentation of Millers Bay Shoreline Restoration Site Project by the Urban Ecology Oshkosh.
Yes, tonight we have Shannon Davis Faust that's going to come and present their project for the Millers Bay restoration site and what they are planning on doing with it and how they think it will help out the community.
I think, to jump in just real quick, that there's some longer-term members on this board that have been here for quite some time. This goes back to 2011, when we had some interest in some shoreline restoration projects, more of an educational sites for the community, and the Millers Bay site was chosen. Since then, we've asked the volunteer group that has been maintaining those to come forward and request an extension of the commitment from the city. So in 2022, the board agreed to a 3-year commitment to continue the planting areas, again, as long as they were maintained. You can see in the memo, there's a couple different names. A lot of the same interest and groups are part of the conversation and part of the project yet. As Travis said, right now it's the members of the Urban Ecology Oshkosh that will be helping us out.
Thank you, Ray and Travis. Thank you very much for having us tonight. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, my name is Shannon, and I'm here with Sarah. I got this. Yep. And I am here on 2 capacities tonight. I've been on the board for Wild Ones since 2010, and I'm also with Urban Ecology Oshkosh, which started about 3 years ago. And Sarah is here in the capacity of Urban Ecology Oshkosh. And go ahead.
Yeah, I'm titled as a key volunteer for Urban Ecology Oshkosh. So we're a fresh group. We're all kind of fresh and new to this, but I'm one of the co-managers of the Millers Bay Restoration Site area.
Can we just real quickly get your addresses for the record?
Yeah.
Sure. Should we state them or?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in Omro, 4946 Broderick Road, Omro, 54963.
And I'm in Neenah, 130 Lennox Street, Neenah, Wisconsin, 54956.
Thank you.
So in doing this presentation, I had to take a step back to look at the history of the site, and so I was searching online, and I found that it's gaining attention to this day without anybody even pushing it. It was featured in the Oshkosh Northwestern as one of the pretty places in Oshkosh to look at. And that was like the day after I found this, so that was pretty cool. So recognizing that the communities want these kinds of plantings, these native shoreline or any kind of native planting, people have come to the realization that this is an important part of sustainability, that native plants are not only bringing back habitat that we need for pollinators and for birds and much more, but it's also a major carbon storage area and also helps with water quality, which is an important feature right next to the lake. So for what we wanted to talk about, we wanted to tell you a little bit about the history if you're not familiar with it, and what are the problems today that we're looking at, and how we can maybe fix those problems, and how we can generate even more benefit maybe into the future if we fix these problems. The picture you see there, right there, is the picture that is currently at the native planting that is on the north side, which is up by the, what is the name of that?
Millers Bay. Oh, the Ames.
Yes, Ames Point, yes, thank you. So this is the area that's up by Ames Point, and then there's the other area by the pump house on the south side. So it started in 2011 as the Friends of Menominee Park Shoreland, and they started with that north site, and they put native plants in, they seeded it, they put erosion control mats in to establish the planting, and there is a very, very long list of supporting organizations. They worked very hard at putting this planting in and getting support to put it in. With many different volunteers and letters of support, which I actually did include at the end of this presentation, which I can send to you if you'd like to see it. So they did a survey in 2014. They found over 25 plant species, and they added some more plants. They added them as grown plants. Those are called plugs. And they found that there was a problem with the tall plants, and some of the residents were not appreciative of the tall plants. So they decided to move them to the pump house area where they deemed that it wouldn't be a problem with the tall height because it wasn't blocking anybody's view in front of the pump house there. So they moved plants and they did another planting, but unfortunately that did not stop the tall plants that were already established up by Ames Point. At this time, then the project was managed by Michelle Bogdan-Mutzel, who is the person that we took over the planting from last year. The Urban Ecology Oshkosh did. So Urban Ecology Oshkosh did not come into the picture until last year. I was working with these plantings a few years ago in 2022, I think this was my class, 2022 or 2023, I'm sorry. My class was out here. What we were trying to do is control the tall plants by hand, and it was a lot of work. And to think that, I mean, we were out there for a very long time as a pretty good group of people, and a mower could have done what we did probably in 10 minutes. It took us probably an hour, hour and a half. It really wasn't. We could see that there was a big problem here. That's not sustainable. So I did a survey back on May 27th, not very long ago, and we did a survey of the plants that we could see growing at the time. And we did find some really nice plants. There's a list up here if you're familiar with native plants. And we also found several nesting birds, including a kingbird. And then there were people that were right in the middle of the native planting fishing. It was actually interesting how they were conglomerated right around the planting. They were, I would say, appreciating the planting. But we also found some not so good things. We found lots of young trees that were growing in the planting that should be controlled right away. We also I have a list here of the aggressive and invasive species that we found growing in there. So it's actually much of this planting is overtaken by those, unfortunately. And the cup plant and the tall coreopsis are interesting because my understanding is they were not intentionally planted. And anybody who knows about native plantings wouldn't put those aggressive species in, not in an urban setting. So it's surprising to see them there. So I'm sorry of the small font here. There are good plants in there we would like to see get rescued, and some people want aggressive species. So we would like to have a plant rescue, but then we would like to see some of it cleaned up and brought back to a clean slate completely, and reseeded or replanted. If we go in there with a mower, which we think that it should be mowed, there's some big rocks that my class had actually put in there. They're painted rocks to recognize the value of pollinators and native plants. And then that we found in areas in both of the plantings that should be salvaged. They don't have very many aggressive species in them. We could move some of the good plants into those salvage areas. There are options here. We could herbicide, which would be probably the fastest thing to do, but we want to be sustainable, and if we want to avoid herbicides, then we can smother the planting. We could place cardboard over it and then put soil over it, which then we would need to either put cardboard over the top of the soil with wood chips, or we would need erosion control mats. The other option is to move to a different location and just keep mowing this area if we wanted to avoid herbicides. There's just a lot of options here, but the one that we like the best, that would be most sustainable, would be to smother what's currently there. These are the areas. This is the salvage area that we see at Ames Point, right next to the bench in the middle. Right in front of the bench is filled with Canada thistle and species that should be eliminated. This is the area by the pump house, and right here in this immediate area in front of you is the area that we see that should be salvaged. It's good. It doesn't have much for aggressive species. It can be controlled by hand. Being aware of the rocks and the paint in the planting is very important if someone goes in there with a mower. So we would see that in June, we would have the rescue. In July or August, we would mow and smother. In September and October, we would plant seeds or plant plugs. We're in touch with several volunteer groups that we could solicit to come out. We also have quite a few volunteers for UEO directly. So we feel confident that we'd be able to get volunteers to do this. And we don't have a budget. We do not have a fund for ourselves. We would be very reliant. We may be able to raise some money, but we would need some time to do that. So our lessons learned is that the original plants the species that were planted were not the correct ones. We see that going forward, we want to have demonstration sites that we can be proud of in Oshkosh, and seeing how visible this area is with hundreds of people going by every day, that people could see how beautiful native plantings can look. I personally have planted many native plantings. I know how to do it right. I have pretty much my entire adult life has been in native plants, native landscaping, and we would also be able to, if we haul in different types of soil, we can show different types of plantings. We can do a more sandy soil planting right next to a more clay soil planting. And we can make it look really nice. And when we plant with more intention so that we can bring groups out there and we can show them what these native plants look like, starting off with clump plantings that eventually merge together. And then the rest of these are historical slides that I was not going to go through tonight unless you had questions that I could refer back to for you. Did you want to add anything?
Not necessarily that I can think of.
All right, thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Well, I guess I have a couple, because I've been involved with this from day one when I was on city council back in 2011 when it was first organized, and it's been kind of basically a nightmare ever since it was formed. And the best thing that happened was move a majority of it down to the water plant area down by the boat landing. What guarantees that you'll keep it to what the city ordinance says is 3 feet height of the plantings? Because that's never been maintained, the 3 foot height, which is actually the ordinance in the city of Oshkosh.
We would select the species that are shorter.
Okay, so you select that, okay. It's always been a volunteer organization from day one, which I think is awesome, but it's never been able to be sustainable in that realm of work days. They can't get enough people. And you mentioned that you're a volunteer organization. Do you feel you can get enough people to maintain it?
Yes, we do.
Because this year, and I'm sure the Parks Board members are aware, we're moving the fireworks down to that part of Menominee Park. And it's also the area of the Out of Street Fishing Club's Children's Fishery, where we have 450 kids and parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts that come down there, and we have this big mess of all these invasive plants and species that creates a problem for the fishing tournament. So I guess I'm concerned. I want it, but I don't think Ames Point is where it should be anymore. I think it needs to get moved. And has your organization looked at another area of the city or area of the parks that if it got moved could be sustainable, that would be a better fit than Ames Point?
I appreciate that question because that was one of the first things that I thought is, unfortunately, this site it's really invaded. It's not invasive species, it's mostly aggressive species, but it's going to take a tremendous amount of work to make it a blank slate again because there's seeds in there. So controlling those seeds would be a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
So I would like to see it moved.
Yep. And I guess that's, like I said, I was on city council for 10 years, and we always, unfortunately, had the same discussion of big plants, can't maintain it, not enough volunteers to make it work. But we didn't, as a council, we always felt that we wanted that, and it's important to have locations like that. My feeling is we need to find another location so it makes it easier for your volunteers and your people to make it happen. And, we want to have that area, the education part. I know we're not taking votes in a sense, but we have Lake Shore Park that has nothing, and I think that's a good location to put it and move it to Lake Shore Park. But we're not here for that tonight. And have you submitted a maintenance plan to city parks? And you brought some stuff up, but is a written plan been submitted to the Parks Department?
I'm not aware of
Okay.
that process.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your time and effort. It's a great effort. I'm not against that at all. Okay, thank you.
I got one. So with potentially moving the program to a different part of town, this board has heard some conversations about shoreline erosion in different parts of the city over the past years. And in keeping with that, do you think you could work with the Parks Department about identifying those spots and potentially looking at feasibility of where these plantings could go in the future for places that have shoreline erosion that this can help mitigate just going forward?
It would be my pleasure to do so.
Assuming that the labor is there and the volunteer force and whatnot. So yeah.
We have several organizations that are interested in these plantings, and yeah, we have a lot of people that would volunteer.
All right, very good. Thank you.
We were not prepared tonight to discuss different options for sites, so that's something that we would have to go back and talk about with our team along with their group as well. You had shown at both of the sites, there's a salvage area that you said wasn't really overtaken, and that's a small portion of each site.
Unfortunately, yes.
Is there an opportunity to salvage those two areas at the
Yes.
site
Yes.
for this year? And we have some discussions about doing something further at another site down the road and still keep these here, but the area might shrink.
Mm-hmm.
As Steve was talking about, some of those areas that are overtaken, we'd figure out what to handle there.
Yes. I would like to see a rescue take place because there are some really nice plants that are in the areas that are overtaken by aggressive species that we would like to move and allow people just to take what's there for the aggressive species if they want them.
And those would be put into those two salvage areas that
Yes.
you showed.
Yep.
And so really the plot up on the north end by Ames Point would almost shrink in half potentially?
Yes, or even less.
Okay.
Less.
And it's
A quarter,
So
yeah.
about a quarter, okay. But I still think, as Steve said, it's something we want to see, but it's something that we need to stay on top of. And as Jacob said, if there's a way we can look at this in some other areas where we're experiencing the shoreline erosion and so forth, we sit down and have those discussions. So that's, I guess, without having had the discussion about different sites, I think for this year, that would be my preference, and Chad and Travis jump in if you don't agree, but I agree that, as you said, the process to start over, it seemed pretty labor intensive, especially over the next month or so, and obviously it's the busy time for all of our staff as well.
Yes. and we would very much like to see native landscaping continue, and we think that we can make it into something that the community would appreciate and maybe want to do on their own properties. And
Yeah, I think
unfortunately,
that
it's just not that right now. It's just not that right now, as you know.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the key things that they brought it forward, saying let's use it for that education, for the community to do this. So,
Unfortunately, the wrong species were placed. Yeah. But I can see I've been out there quite a bit with different groups with my personal students from UW Oshkosh. I've been out there working, and I've been out there enough to see that people congregate around that area. It is appreciated, even as it is.
so if that's agreeable to the Parks Board and their group, I don't think we need to have the maintenance agreement right now, because we would work with them to reduce the sites, work with them, and Travis and Chad can help out on the mowing what we need to, is what I'm thinking. So then, once we have some more discussions, if there's some other locations to give this a try, that's when we bring it back to the board, get the site approved, talk about a maintenance agreement, those types of things.
So you want to vote tonight to move forward, just kind of what you said?
I would like to support
Reduce the site
Yep.
and go forward with them continuing once the site's a little bit reduced and down, and then continue discussion of going forward with.
Yeah, I think give us some time internally to have those discussions. So yes, reduce the site to those two salvageable areas I think that they showed, and I'm sure Travis has taken a look at the sites. I think that makes sense.
I definitely would agree with that. I'd say give us a year
Okay.
to kind of go through and work through some different scenarios and see what we can salvage and how we can work together with them to figure out where and what we can do.
Does that have to go back to Jacob and the council?
No, this
Approval, or-
has actually been something the Parks Board has been taking care of in the past. And I think because we're reducing the size, we're not expanding it, I'm comfortable saying that the board can make that recommendation.
No, I'll make a motion to, as you mentioned it, reduce the site and continue with the great organization that wants to take it over and maintain it and go forward with future planning.
Second.
Alright, Davis?
Aye.
Millet?
Aye.
Plum?
Aye.
Franz?
Aye.
Herman?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Travis will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much. Appreciate the update.
I think it's a good first step.
Yeah, yeah. You've been on the sport club,
Alright.
that's, I know it's been a problem.
All right, on to discuss and recommend placement of the George Washington bust.
The George bust.
All right, so I'm going to, what's it? So in your packet, we have Jeff Now from our planning staff here, because this is really something that planning staff has been working with a number of the neighborhood associations on the east side of town, as well as the library staff, museum staff, parks, public works. When the city purchased the George Washington School site in 2024, the city inherited the Washington bust. And so planning staff, obviously we wanted to try to get that bust back out into the public and celebrate it. And so they started having some discussions with the neighborhood associations. And recently on June 3rd, those three neighborhood associations or their representatives came and talked with staff. And first of all, the three different sites were Roe Park along Washington Avenue, the Carl Schurz area, which is at the end of Washington down near the waters in Menominee Park. And the third one was it William Waters Plaza, Jeff? I believe. William Waters Plaza. And so in those discussions with the neighborhood associations recently, they recommended the Roe Park site. So I just wanted to pull up if the computer So here's Royal Park, YMCA, of course. And the location that we talked about with the neighborhood associations is kind of in this corner. It would be close enough to the sidewalk to make, there's talk about having some historical information put onto a plaque to celebrate the bust, give a little history of where it was and why it's located here, making sure that that's ADA compliant and so it's accessible near the sidewalk. And so this is the first step as far as any recommendations or approvals go. If the board can discuss this and if you agree with Royal Park, it would go to the Plan Commission and then the Common Council. Jeff, is there anything I missed?
Oh, I think you got everything.
So Jeff and I can answer some questions if you have any. There is funds that the neighborhood associations applied for through some neighborhood grant funding through the city. And so their grant funding would help pay for any of the work that would need to be done here. Obviously, we need a concrete slab. There'd be some removing of the bust and so forth. And I think there's some discussion about maybe putting some, beautifying the area a little bit. So working with our staff to come up with, if it's plantings or whatever it might be, but something that'll be hopefully low maintenance for us in that area as well.
How large is the bus? I don't remember seeing it outside of Washington School.
I was gonna have a picture of it.
6 feet tall, I think.
Yeah, I think, because the pedestal was probably about 3.5 to 4 feet, I think, there was a pedestal.
Okay.
And then the bust itself is probably another 18 inches to 2 feet
Okay.
roughly.
Not terribly big.
Is it similar to the Abe Lincoln one that's at the museum in size?
Did we save the pedestal too? Is the pedestal coming along with it, or is that something we make?
The pedestal is saved, yes.
Saved.
Yes.
Does the bust in and of itself need any reconditioning or anything?
Right, any sort of TLC.
You know, it's been sitting there for quite a while, obviously.
That I don't know.
Yeah, I think if it does, there is, because this is part of the Hicks Fund through the
Right.
city, and the library board helps to maintain all the statues and monuments on city property. And so if there is any type of reconditioning or cleaning that would need to take place, it would be funded through that as well.
And does the Landmarks Commission have to weigh in on this? Because they're the historical side of,
Landmarks, I don't believe so.
No.
When we looked at the process for the city approvals, obviously being in a park, it's coming here because it's going to be a structure going out on city property, Plan Commission, and then the Common Council, of course.
Okay.
As far
just
as,
don't want
as
to
far as I
offend
know,
that committee.
yeah, as far as I know, it does not. But again, that's
No.
something we have
Okay.
to check further on.
I appreciate the effort on this.
Yeah,
I've run by Washington School a number of times and saw that bust out there, and I'm just happy that it's found a home.
Yeah.
So I like that the neighborhood associations agreed on Roe Park. They voted on this. They have their input. They're bought in, and I'm just happy that seems like we've come to a good conclusion on this. It'll be displayed prominently. I'm just very happy to see that. So.
I like the idea of Roe Park because it's one of our smaller downtown neighborhood parks, and it'll give us something that stands out. And there's some need for work along that Washington Avenue side, the tree line and stuff, and beautify it a little bit more. I like that idea. I also do think William Waters Plaza would be pretty cool too, but I'm not going to rule against Roe Park.
Yeah, I think when we looked at William Waters with the gazebo that's going on down there and the other things that are currently there, already some benches and tables, we thought it might be getting a little too crowded.
And the other neat thing about that is it's right by the Y there, and gives an opportunity maybe for even some small, groups to come out and have a little tour of, what the importance of that monument there and why, and being on Washington Boulevard. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm supportive of it. You need a vote from this board?
That would be a recommendation to the Plan Commission and Common Council for the approval of the
Go
site.
ahead.
Can move.
Second? Oh, I got it in front of you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, now on to the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan Program.
All right. every year this time, we bring forward the capital improvement program for the Parks Department. We have been working with Finance Department, and we've had some initial meetings already, and those meetings continue over the next couple of weeks before the Common Council will start taking a look at it as well. So what we did, and I will go through each of these 5 years, that we've been asked to come up with a 10-year CIP now. I gave you the first 5 years. If anybody wants to see something in the next 5, we can gladly pull that up. The reason I didn't give you the other 5 is because, as many of you know on this committee, we don't get everything we ask for each year, so things tend to bump back. So giving you 5 years further out past 5 years, I thought might have been a little bit of a waste of time right now. But if there's any projects you want to see, we can pull that up. So that was why we only gave you the first 5. So we can run through these, and then again, this is kind of how we prioritize the projects. We'd like to have discussion with the board to see if there's things you want to see moved around. We can talk about that. And then ultimately, you'll make a recommendation to the Common Council. Once we meet with the council, they get a copy of this, and we let them know that the Parks Board has reviewed it and has recommended this. So, all right, so in 2026, first item is replace ball field lights at Reeds Field North. I'm not going to get into a lot of the justification, but if there's questions, but basically these lights are very old. We can no longer get replacement parts. Our electrical staff has been, for lack of a better word, cobbling the lights together to make sure that we could have lighting at the ball diamonds for the last number of years. And so we are trying to phase in some projects down at Reeds. If this board recalls, we had originally planned for about a $4 or $5 million project that included the parking lot, the ball fields, the restroom concession building, and so forth. We are moving forward with some design of that restroom concession building this year. And so we started phasing in, again, some of these things on the ball field that we need to take care of. And the lights for us are a pretty high priority. The next item, South Park splash pad replacement. The splash pad was constructed in 2004, so it's 21, 22 years old by this time next year. A lot of issues with that. The surfacing, the original surfacing, we removed because it became too slippery for individuals using that. We were getting some slips and falls, so we removed that. We put down some concrete and put down a surfacing that'll help with some of that, but we're finding that some of the fountains no longer work, or I think the one that Chad looked at, just getting a replacement, one piece was about $15,000. And so when you start taking a look at the splash pad, infrastructure, piping and everything underground, we'd take a look at when we would redo that. But we do have most of the infrastructure there. The water's on site, of course, and so that is a heavily used splash pad, and we really think that it's something, the time has come for it to be upgraded.
And just to interject a little bit too, I mean, a splash pad is technically a playground. We look at 17 to 20, 15 to 17 years to replace playground structures. Even as much as this gets used wear and tear, it's about that time frame too.
Sure. So, and really it runs 7 days a week, Memorial Day to Labor Day is the typical schedule. If it's nice earlier, we'll try to open it. If it's nice later, we'll try to keep it open. So it's heavily used. Next project, Abbey Park play equipment replacement. That was installed in 2006. You'll see in here a number of play equipment replacements from 2006. Again, if you've been on the board a while, you'll know that over the last 10 to 15 years, you've been seeing playgrounds that were installed in 2001 to 2006, basically. And again, between those 15 to 20 year frames, that's when we start finding that replacement parts, things break, and we just aren't able to. Some of them may not be up to the safety guidelines at this point. So we've done a good job of replacing a lot of the older ones. I think we're going to be down to about 3 or 4 parks once we take care of the ones that we have in the CIP. So Abbey Park, West Algoma Park is another one from 2006. So we recommend those being replaced. Menominee Park Zoo improvements, this is a request that we have every other year of the council of $100,000. And what this does is really puts the funding from the city forward so that we can go and continue to raise funds for some of those major exhibits, major improvements that we're looking to do. Obviously, the donors would like to make sure that the city is participating in some of those large projects. And so we use this, if you haven't been down there this year, we used it for the entryway improvements, a lot of paving. There's the gates and some of the fencing was redone there. And trying to think what else.
Most of that infrastructure, I call it the softer side of the infrastructure items that the city can improve upon to make the site better. Perimeter fencing, that'll be a big chunk of our future developments too down there. Entrance gates for zoo staff to make exhibits safer. So there's a lot of areas, and it's nice to see that, like Ray said, see the donors put their names on the exhibits and the fun things that happen at the zoo versus the other infrastructure items that aren't really as gratifying.
Yeah, as Chad said, I think we would spend a good chunk of that $100,000 on replacement of the fencing, security-wise. The next one, Quarry Park Development, as the board knows, we're working with the Neighborhood Association to complete the Quarry Park Master Plan currently, and we wanted to put some dollars in here to provide some type of improvement, some amenity at Quarry Park. So we don't know what that is yet because we're still working on that master plan.
Ray, for Quarry Park, just not to interject, but just very quickly, is there any monitoring that still needs to go on in there for methane? How long will that have to continue for? Is that just in perpetuity? Or?
Yeah, that would be, yes, my
I figured as much, yeah, okay.
And we're taking all that into consideration as we look at the master plan. We've had meetings with the DNR as well as AECom, who's done a lot of the work on the site for the monitoring program. So,
would this also include kind of smoothing over the surface a little bit, or is that just going to be tougher sell?
Yep. This, if you compare it to Red Arrow Park, again being on a landfill, they continue to sink and go down. So we wouldn't be putting the money into that. What we'd be looking at is maybe getting in some gravel trails, maybe some things that the Neighborhood Association is talking about is some outcroppings, some stone outcroppings, maybe something from the quarry. You know, there used to be a quarry operation there. So some of those things that are those smaller items that I think we could maybe at least get something done for them next year. Again, what that is, we can determine as we get through the master plan.
Sure, I appreciate your reference on this because this is not a particularly easy site.
Yeah.
And most of the improvements will be on the surface. There's no ground penetration that can take place, basically.
So how much of that, to his going, and not getting in the weeds a lot, how much of that is the park's responsibility because it is a park, or is that really more Public Works' budget than it is Parks is on the top, in a sense. Everything below should fall under Public Works, right?
The monitoring and all that work is still part of the Public Works.
But anything that would have to be done to improve that so that we can continue to make that a park should still fall under Public Works, right?
No, it's a park site that we've maintained for quite some time. There used to be soccer and football.
Right. And I remember that. My kids played there.
Yeah.
You know, in OIB and stuff, but I'm just thinking that we're really the top stuff. We provide the enjoyment side. The maintenance side should really fall all under Public Works.
Public
I would
Works,
think.
they're across the street.
Yeah, I know.
That site. There's another site across Napa, and so.
Okay. All right. Just
So I hear what you're saying, Steve, but I think because it's a park, knowing
we
what
have
we can and can't
to
do.
invest in it too.
Right. And either way, it's going to be tax dollars.
Yep.
Or borrowed dollars.
I think a good example of I'm going to call it a partnership for that one is like we do with the leach. The leach is monitored constantly, and it has to be. That's just the way it is, but it's a great recreational site. So.
The final one, park trail improvements. The trails, this is some funding that we request every year. We have a lot of trails throughout the park system, and this really helps us to stay on top of the maintenance, reconstruction of some of those, and any improvements that we might need to make.
Speaking of trail improvements, has there been any news on the county handing over the portion of the Waiawash Trail over to the city and whether or not that includes them paving it before handing it over to us.
I have not had discussions as of recent with them, but we have made it pretty clear that we would not be taking it on unless it would be paved essentially from the university out to I-41.
Okay.
But it's a good question. I'm going to check with Adam because I haven't heard from them in a while.
Yeah, I just think it would be interesting to kick the tires on that. Personally, I love the Whitewash Trail, but I can see, the washout issues and the hazards that may entail over time. So I know this is something the county likes to keep kicking the can down the road on. We'd just like to see some action on it, especially if they can get the paving done.
Yeah, we, up until about last year, we had a lot of consistent meetings with our legal counsel, county staff and their legal counsel.
Sure.
So I think once we get to that point and when it gets paved, I think we're very close to saying, all right, here's how we'll handle the transaction, I guess. So, but I can get you an update on that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm going to jump into 27, and again, if you got questions, let me know, but we'll keep trying to keep going through. One item, the top item here in 2027, Rainbow Park restroom renovation. We have held off renovating that restroom because we've been waiting for the improvements to that intersection. And as part of when that project is going to be completed, we are then going to be taking a look at the north side of the park and redoing. The master plan calls for a new restroom shelter building in that area. And so we would incorporate it at that time. What we understand from our engineering team recently, I don't have the years in front of me, but I believe there's going to be some DOT work on
Oshkosh Bridge.
The bridge, Highway 21 in 2032, 2033-ish. And so they're holding off on that intersection improvement at this point until then. So, we're looking 7-8 years out. This restroom is in very poor condition. We would not do a complete rebuild. We've redone a number of restrooms, a lot of the boat launches on South Main. We've redone the Lakefly Cafe restrooms.
Fugleberg, 24th, the Lakefly, Roshland,
And
Tech
again,
Miller, West Haven, all of those we've redone.
the council and this board has been supportive of that because those were some of the things that came out in our corps and the surveys where the restrooms are atrocious. So this is one that we've held off, but I don't think we can hold off that long any longer. So wanted to let you know about that one. Next one, we'd be looking to replace the ball fields on Reed South. Out at Roosh Park, we have a large section of boardwalk that is really on the corner of Wellington Drive and Sawyer Creek Drive that we need to look to replace. And the reason for that is it's a large pedestrian connection for the youth from those subdivisions north of Sawyer Creek to get to Traeger School. And that boardwalk goes over to Sawyer Creek, and there are some major replacement and maintenance things that we would have to take a look at. So we'd be looking to replace that boardwalk. Next one, Abe Roshland Play Equipment, again, 2006. And with all these playgrounds, we would be doing the poured-in-place rubber surfacing. Excuse me. Next one is Bauman Park. We actually replaced that equipment a couple years back, but we did not do the rubber surfacing. I think it was just a matter of not having the funding at the time. But we have the perimeter walk, the concrete there, so it's fairly easy to get the poured-in-place surfacing in there. And we've kind of held off on that, but I think if we can start doing some of this surfacing on Bauman, that would be good. And then you'll see two more projects down. Tech Miller Park, same thing. We redid that playground not too long ago. Again, put in the wood mulch, but we would like to see that become the rubber surfacing again because less maintenance, less replacement of that mulch to keep it a safe playground. Going back to the number 6 project, Mary Jewel Park Ball Field reconstruction. That is really the field for the 14 to 16-year-olds in the city, that pony league I would call from back in the day. That's really the only field, other than some school district facilities, that are available for them. We've had some discussions with some of the user groups that would have an interest in potentially doing some fundraising and assistance with that. But I think it's time to take a look at that. We don't have any outfield fence there, so if you go by, you'll see the portable snow fence, and that many times is in disarray or knocked over. So we'd be looking to get the outfield fence, redo the infield, and a couple other improvements there. Again, Tech Miller, the play equipment surfacing. Parkside A, which is out on Ripplin, Oregon. This was some parkland that was dedicated as part of that subdivision development out there. And we are starting to get some questions from some of the residents just asking when we're going to do something with that parkland. So this would be some initial development out there, getting some of the land smoothed out and maybe get some walking trails or some type of low impact items going on out there. Red Arrow Skate Park, we are looking to bring in a consultant to help us come up with some of the renovations we'd have to look at. But then the $100,000 that we're requesting in 27 would be actually to do some of those renovations. Roosh Park Bridge to Casey's Meadow. This is a bridge that is in our Roosh Park master plan, and it's west of Traeger School. And again, with the new subdivisions going up on the north side of Sawyer Creek, off of Casey's Meadow. I wish Jeff was still here, but I believe they are doing some additional phases of development out there that have been coming through planning staff. Again, to allow residents to get from those subdivisions across the creek over towards Traeger and towards the YMCA. We need a bridge to get over Sawyer Creek. Pickard Park, as this board knows, we just approved the master plan, and the neighbors out there would like to see some continued improvements going. We are, right now, as part of my update, I was going to let you know, we are working with the neighbors to choose the playground equipment. We have the proposals that came in within the last week or two, and so we have a meeting with the neighborhood next week to let them choose which playground that they'd like to have out there. So we'll have the new playground in, maybe some of the trail as part of the funding that we had set aside for this year in the budget.
I know it says tennis, but would that be some pickleball and tennis, or would those just be pure tennis courts?
We'll have that discussion. I think we need to take a look at that yet, based on the number of pickleball courts that we are having. Maybe it's pickleball and it's not tennis, and I think it'll really depend. My concern with, again, the pickleball here is the noise and getting too close to the residents. I want to make sure that if they're asking for it, that they're well aware that there may be some noise there at 9 o'clock at night potentially. So, but we'll have those discussions once we get into that. So probably should say tennis / pickleball. So to be determined, Tim.
Okay.
And then the Riverside Cemetery roads repaving. Every other year we request $25,000. This helps Travis to continue to improve some of the roadways out there. He works with the streets staff, and basically they charge us for the material that comes in, and their staff and their equipment takes care of doing the road work. So that's really the material cost to keep doing some repaving out there. If you haven't been through Riverside Cemetery, the roads, they're out there this week doing a lot of paving, but there's still a lot of roads that are in very poor condition. So, any questions? I'll keep moving. 2028, again, looking again still towards the REITs complex. We'd be start to replace the fencing and scoreboards out at the ball diamonds. Menominee Park Zoo improvements, again, every other year. Quarry Park, again, right now it's basically a placeholder at $50,000 until we have some type of an idea through the master plan. Lakeshore Park, we do have some funding available yet that we are working on coming up with some projects, but 28, we probably start looking to request some funding for Lakeshore Park. What that helps us do is helps us to keep on with the master plan, but it also gives us some grant funding opportunity to have that as the city's match for any grants I think there's some DNR grants out there that we could really do to add the trail systems and a few other things. Stegbauer Park restroom shelter construction. This has been in the plan for a number of years, continues to get pushed back, but I think it's something that we feel we need to take a look at pretty seriously. We do get some concerns by the bar on the corner that individuals are coming in there from the Ball Diamond, using their restrooms, most likely youth with potentially spikes and so forth on, and I think we just need to consider looking at being a good neighbor there. So if we could get a restroom, and I think we're not looking at a large shelter, but a small shelter overhang with a couple picnic tables, I think would be good there. Menominee Park, the pickleball tennis courts, lighting. Again, that's been in our plans for a number of years that continue to get pushed back. We are getting a couple more requests, I would say, every year because of the pickleball and the popularity. I think we're getting more requests from people to go further into the night. Looking to do some repairs to Menominee Park Fugelberg boat launches. That's really some concrete work in the launch areas. For that, we would be, as part of the funding for that, we'd be recommending using some of the boat launch funding that we have been collecting. Part of the fees, or not part of the fees, all of the fees for boat launches have to be segregated for boat launch maintenance and improvements. And so that would, we'd recommend that would come out of that fund. West Haven Circle Park splash pad and a design, again, that's something that getting a splash pad on the west side has been a pretty big request. Another project, again, that gets pushed back, but I think it's pushed back for a number of projects that, again, we need to look at what we have, make sure we're maintaining what we had before we add some additional things that may fall behind on maintenance. So, and then we've got the trail replacement request in there. 2029, again, you're looking at Reach Ball Fields. Here's where we'd actually start renovating the infields and the outfields, so the ball field actual renovations. We'd be starting to look at Fugelberg, Tech Miller Park, the basketball court resurfacing. This Miller's Bay dredging is one that is a large price tag, and right now it's basically a placeholder until we get even closer, but that is something that I think eventually we're going to have to take a look at doing, just based on the sailboat mooring program, but more so for the fishermen, the recreational boaters using that site, and the fishing tournaments that use that site. The sediment is filled in quite a bit.
Does that also include the lagoon on the other side of the bridge, or would it just be Miller's Bay in itself?
Yeah, it'd be the bay out in front of the launch, and then getting a channel basically out to the lake.
Okay.
44th Parallel Park. A lot of these projects actually are coming out of our recent Corp update. We start looking at that as making sure that we're continuing to do projects out of that. This is one of those projects. There's an open air shelter out there. It's really pushed back in the park and not the easiest accessible, so we'd be looking to have something probably constructed closer to the new playground area, so that families could sit under there as the kids play. Park trail improvements, again, the annual request. For many years, we were requesting park lighting replacement. We've got old fiberglass poles that we started replacing in a number of parks. This year, Chad is working with the Stevens Park Neighbor Association to replace lights and get lights placed in Stevens Park. But we've done this in other parks, and we would continue on with Menominee Park. And that's really just a portion of Menominee Park, but we could at least start with that. You see the Cemetery Road repaving again. Right now, just some funding for Lakeshore Park, and again, as we're getting further out, all these things are kind of fluid. And then we're looking at potential design of the Menominee Park Beach House. We pushed this back a little bit because of the Clear Wells project that's going to be taking place over the next 3 years, roughly. That end of Merritt is going to be a lot of construction going on, and the roadways, Lake Drive, Lakeshore Drive, is going to be completely closed off for a large period of that time. And I think the other thing that we're hearing from residents and citizens is now that the bathhouse or the beach house is not there, they really like how it's opened up the view to the lake. And so I'm hearing that from individuals that a couple years back had been talking about, getting something new and more modern facility down there. That I think we really need to take a look at. Is that a building that we need a full bathhouse building again? But the reason it's pushed back again is because of the larger Clear Wells project. So this would give us at least some design dollars if we kept it in there.
So kind of abandoning the two plans, looking at something new, something different. I don't say abandoning, but.
Maybe doing nothing at the site.
Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe we expand the beach. That's been part of the project. And we hear that request a lot more now, I think, to expand the beach a little bit more.
So looking just for smaller restrooms there and expanding the beach type area would be.
Any building we put down there is going to, it's a tough design because there are some, right then in that area is another archaeological sensitive site. So it's something where we've already talked with some designers and the UWM archaeology staff we met on site. We'd really have to do some unique designs, getting not pillars, but
Helical piles and stuff.
piles,
Yeah.
basically putting a building on piles to minimize the amount of excavating that we'd be doing. There is documentation that there possibly village area in that area, so again, it's very sensitive archaeologically, and I think we have to respect that and so again, what building goes there, I think that'll be determined between now and.
Well, I like the idea of the plans that we've gone over and looked at before, but after the building was gone and to see how wide open that was, I like that. I like that view, and it just kind of opens everything up on that beach side, so that's a good idea to look at increasing that beach size and seeing what else we could put out there, so.
To your point, back when I was a kid, that area, they had not only the beach house, the swimming area had diving boards and rafts and all kinds of stuff for kids to play with. And then we had an ice cream shop just to the north of there. That, I forget what it all was. It was ice cream shop, and you got food there and all kinds of things. And that was there built knowing that was a tribal Indian area. But that was built back in the 40s and 50s, that old building.
Yeah, and you got Lakeside Cafe is not that far of a walk.
Right.
For concessions.
And that might be the
restrooms.
option is to expand that facility. I mean, I don't know how much of that is in that tribal area that could give us a problem, but yeah, we already have, water and electricity and all that. Could you make that more of a restroom, a bigger restroom / place to change clothes, whatever?
You got a while to look at it.
Yeah.
So, but it's good to have that in the budget.
Yep.
Yep.
Good point, yeah.
All right, so that was 2029. Now we're really getting out there with 2030, but again, I think Red Arrow Park would be the final older piece of playground equipment that we would need to replace. We've pushed this one out there again because this will give us some further time to see how much more Red Arrow Park continues to have the depressions and sinking because of the landfill issues out there. But that is one by this time that we'd have to take a look at getting that replaced. Pickard Park, getting some pathways and some lighting in there, again, trying to keep that park developed. Same thing with Red Arrow Park lighting replacement. We'd want to take a look at that as we get closer to see what the site looks like and the use out there. Then you can see the annual park trail improvements request. Menominee Park Zoo every other year is back in there. We're keeping in a placeholder again for Lakeshore Park to continue developing out there. We did put in a number right now for the beach house, if that is desired at that point. And then a project at Fugelberg Boat Launch, adding another launch out there and moving the break wall a little bit further out so that larger boats could launch from there. And that's something, we had some preliminary discussions with some of the fishing groups, and they have some interest in some of that as well. But again, you can see there's some large dollar projects, and we try to spread those out so that we're not trying to get a whole funding every year, but it still adds up when you take a look at the the total dollar amount when we're trying to, again, maintain what we have, as well as continue to add some of those things in the new parks. So I know it's a lot of information. Any questions or any thoughts on any reprioritizing? I guess for now, I would suggest we focus on 26 and 27, because everything past that is really going to depend how the next 2 years go.
The only thing I saw, and you guys explained it well why you're doing it the way you're doing it, was REITs, the diamonds. I was looking at it thinking those fences and that scoreboard need to get replaced sooner than later. But knowing that, understanding that we're replacing the lights first of all, because it's difficult to find, to find lights for it and the pieces to fix it. We did the same thing in our tennis facility where those were kind of like, yeah, you're running out of it, and we went to LEDs there. So it makes sense to hit those lights first.
Yeah, the lights for us are really pressing. We've probably waited too long to start requesting those.
And in the past, we looked at it as one big plan. Now you're just taking one piece of it as per year, so that's correct. Yeah.
It's like phase 1 this year, we'll be working on the concession restroom building for raising and reconstruction and reviewing what a lot of the infrastructure needs are utility-wise and stuff going forward to help hopefully reduce the next phases coming in to make it easier going forward.
But it's good to see REITs get kind of redone. Is it getting used fairly well?
I think the fields are getting used. We always like to see more increase in the programs coming
Right.
through. Hopefully more will come in that point, or we can reschedule different programs going to utilize them in the future.
But right now, they're used 4 nights a week?
4 nights.
And most weekends?
Okay.
Monday through Thursday, only a couple tournaments here and there right now. But I think the bigger thing is, Red Arrow's got some, athletic fields have some issues, and things may have to be refocused at some point, from that. That ground is continually to shift, and
Right.
it's a tough environment to keep an athletic field on. So, might have to repurpose some programs at time if things don't change there.
There's always an issue when it was on city council, and I'm sure Jacob's got the same issues. If you had to, you gave us from 26 to 30, top five things that you really think City of Oshkosh needs. Can you narrow that down, that you think this is what you're gonna say, hey, to the city manager, to the city council, City Parks needs these 4 or 5 things?
I would say what you see in 26. We tried to keep it, I don't want to say a low dollar number, but we try to be between the 1 and 2 million has been kind of the sweet spot that I think the council's been comfortable providing the park. So I wanted to be realistic. I think we need to stay on top of the playground replacements. But as we just spoke about, the Reeds fields, it's time. They've been in there for 15 years. We've been looking at those getting done, and so that site, I think it's time for that. I also, as I talked about all along, between Quarry Park, Pickard Park, Parkside A, again, those are newer parks, but we do need to start looking at putting some things in there because those areas are growing.
Right.
So I think we're trying to balance maintaining what we have, but continuing to add some new things that the new citizens are requesting as well.
Okay. I just know that always comes up in budget time when they ask department heads what are the top gotta have kind of things, and it'd be nice that as a board we could say, we're standing on these things for the citizens of Oshkosh, for our parks and wellness going forward. Can we give up a few things? Sure, but these are the things that we really think enhances why people want to come to Oshkosh, and we're expanding our housing network and things, and obviously when we've done that, we've added park place, land and stuff, but we need these things to be competitive with other communities in Park and Rec too.
Right. And you look at it, it's heavy on the maintenance side, which is good. We have to take care of that. But we
Maintain
have
what we got.
a lot of things to take care of, and we're not really pushing out there for too much that's new. It's probably about 80-20 at best in most years. So.
Yeah.
I think what a number of people need to remember over time is that what you don't replace this year, what you don't repair this year will just cost more next year. So the bill will never get cheaper. And I appreciate, the replacements here. We're not overextending ourselves. I think we're taking care of what we have and investing prudently in expansion. So I like this. This is a solid plan for me.
Yep. It's a good plan.
Okay. Well, looking at 26 and 27, it's replacing old equipment and fixing stuff that has needed to be fixed for a while. 27 is the same, it's just Rush Park takes 2 big jobs that's planned for 27, the boardwalk replacement and the bridge. But that gets utilized a lot from that part of the community getting to school, and kind of a thing where you have to look at it to make sure that it's getting fixed. I haven't been there, so I don't know how bad a repair it is, but.
Yeah, I think for me, if you keep an eye on what's growing out to the west, out in the Casey's Meadow area, it continues to grow. A lot of homes being out there, a lot of youth, younger families, and we don't have a park in that area for them. So this is really their neighborhood park, but as Lester said, it's also their best route to school. I think when we get to that point, or starting this year already, there may have to be some discussions with the school district. I know when the old trails going through Rouge Park now, that was a city school district collaborative project to build those, because the school district knew that's how the new residents would get to Traeger School, saved on busing costs and so forth. So that might have to be some discussions we have on some of those projects.
Yeah, makes sense.
So if there's no other questions, I guess what I would like is a recommendation to the council that this is what you're approving or moving on to them would be great.
So moved.
Oh, go ahead.
I will move the 2026 through 2030 CIP for the council. And
I'll
recommend
second.
approval.
Davis,
Aye.
Millet,
Aye.
Plum,
Aye.
Franz,
Aye.
Herman. Motion carried.
Thank you. All right, on to staff reports.
Great. Well, I've talked enough, and I talked about both of these, so update on Picker Park. Again, that playground, the proposals are in. We have a neighborhood meeting next week, so we'll have a chosen project to start moving on out there. That'll take place most likely late summer, early fall. And then Quarry Park Master Plan, again, we are meeting with the neighborhood groups currently, and right now Rattler Corporation is designing a couple of concept designs for that. So we'll keep you posted on that one. That's it for me.
I'll see if I can make it through without coughing. So, few updates for you. One, the Menominee Park zoo path and entrance to the facility down there. If you haven't been down, I hope you can get down and take a look at that. And one, just the cleanliness of it coming in, the accessible routes that we provided, but more importantly, I think the great collaboration between our city departments to perform this and get it done before we open up for our seasonal year before Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend was a great asset. Having all the paths now fully ADA compliant, open for our long-range goals to stay open year-round for snow removal and foot traffic. Will be wonderful through there. So, like I said, our teams did a great job working together to make this a reality for the zoo down there. In efforts to that, I think opening weekend, we had just here over 4,500 people of a Memorial Day weekend alone, which was wonderful. So, Stevens Park, as Ray mentioned earlier, a lot of improvements taking place down there right now. Actually, tonight, they finished their final course on our Port and Place playground for that facility, so hopefully by Wednesday we'll have that open for the playground. As of tomorrow, we'll be starting the lighting project, so that'll be going on trails along the trail lighting for there, with the addition of the flagpole base that'll be in just off the north side of the park shelter building. And also, we had bids received for doing the 44th parallel tennis ball pickleball court, and then redoing the basketball tennis courts at Stevens Park. So those projects will be taking place there later in the year. In addition, Rainbow Park Playground, That will be near completion here by the end of the week, if not the early part of next week. So that'll be a great enhancement at Rainbow. And 44th Parallel, Co-op and Stevens Park already updated those on that end. But a lot of nice things happening that people get to take shape and use here for the summer. Looking forward to that, so.
Very nice, thank you. And Travis?
Mine's gonna be pretty short. So, on May 30th, well, it's before that, actually. Last year, we were approached by the Quarry Park Neighborhood Association that wanted to take that little 18-inch strip along Knapp Street on Quarry Park and do something similar to the Marigold Mile in Appleton. So after a little bit of discussion and a little bit of prep work, we on May 30th, they got the neighborhood association together with some volunteers and planted all 600 feet of that strip with marigolds. They happily named it the Quarry Gold, which I think is rather cheeky. But it looks good. It'll be a nice improvement for that little strip as opposed to overgrown turf. And it's very much appreciated.
And the neighbors are going to continue to water.
And that's the neighbors will continue to water it and maintain it.
Very nice.
Good partnership.
Thank you, Travis.
All right, any other business?
I move to adjourn and get Chad a pop
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.